Welcome back to the Plottery. I'm so happy to have you here. Hello, if you are new here, my name is Char. I am a writing coach, and today I'm going to share some of the best advice that's actually been taught to me rather than me teaching it to others. But I have also taught this advice to others. Make no mistake there. Anyway, now before I jump into this video, I did want to mention that I am hosting a workshop on how to leverage backstory in order to plot out your novels a lot easier and do it so with purpose. If you would like to join into this workshop, there will be a link in the description box that you can check out and get yourself a ticket, and I will hopefully see you there. We're gonna start with the first piece of advice, which is that the perfect draft does not exist. And I know that you have probably heard this like 1,000 times before. It's one of those things that we repeatedly hear people say, and we see them online and we see them written out, and I think it's one of those things that just goes in one ear and out the other. At least that's what it's like for me, or what it has been like for me until I actually started to listen to that and to process it. And I think it took actually me getting to the end of an actual first draft to understand this piece of advice and why it is so important, and why applying it to your everyday writing can really change your process and the speed at which you write. And I think that's probably one of the most important lessons that I've taken away from that. Because once you actually rid yourself of the mentality that whatever draft you're writing has got to be perfect, it has got to be better than anyone's first draft that's ever been written, I think we take this advice very much to mean like, oh yeah, I understand it, I know what it means, I'm totally gonna stick to it. But then when it actually comes down to writing, we're like, does it actually apply to me though? Or am I just a bad writer if I don't write a perfect first draft? Now, I do think that a lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of people that I've coached, have kind of had the same epiphany about this by the time that they've finished their first draft, and I'm super happy to have been a part of that. But I do think it's really important if you are potentially someone who's struggling with perfectionism, with writing a draft that you put pressure on to be better than it maybe needs to be for the first time when you ever write a project. This will be something that I would love for you to focus on as you make your way through your first draft, because I do think getting a first draft of a first project that you have never written before actually done to the end is a game changer. And once you do actually finish it, you will see how much you can still do, how many more ideas you can apply to it, how many more revisions you'll probably have for that first draft. But once you are through with that process, it becomes so much easier. So definitely try to work on taking this advice seriously, and don't think that it doesn't apply to you, because it does. There are very few people who actually write maybe like one draft and then polish it up. So I wouldn't go into writing thinking that that's gonna be you, because no matter how good you are, I think most of us will still need to do revisions and will still need to do drafts. And that's not a bad thing, and it does not make you a bad writer. And I think it actually can speed up your writing process if you take away the pressure of, oh my God, I have to write this coherently, cohesively for the first time, just right off the bat. Once that pressure is off of you, the writing just comes so much easier, and the revisions will click a lot easier down the line as well. My second piece of advice is that outlines change. And now this is a piece of advice that I didn't really hear about. I didn't really hear anyone talking about this, but it was something that I kind of had to figure out through my journey as a writer. So basically what this means is that an outline should not just be a document that is set in stone. So I know a lot of writers go into their writing journey thinking that the first step to writing a good novel is to plot everything out and to have a solid outline. But I can guarantee you, like 99% of the time, that's never gonna be the outline that you actually end up with once you finish the project. And a common mistake that writers then tend to fall into is they will just get stuck in the outlining process as if it's the biggest part of writing a novel. It's not, it's the actual writing. right? The outlining is a great part of prepping your project. It's a great prop of getting your head in the game and kind of streamlining what it is that you actually want to do with this project. What is you want to say with this project? What kind of characters do you want to have in it? What kind of themes do you want to explore? Potentially, what kind of plot twist do you want to have in the storyline to kind of organize yourself? But it's not where you should be spending months and years of your time unless you are plotting something that is really, really, really huge and you need research and preparation in order to pull this off. I wouldn't spend more than a couple of weeks, a couple of months at best plotting your project. But I do think in my case, I always push my writers that I coach to actually get to the writing within like a couple of weeks of working with me, within a couple of weeks of having that idea and working on the project. And the whole point of this is they will have an outline. They will craft an outline before we start, but they will look at this outline as a living document. It's going to be something that changes as their story progresses. So as they write stuff, I don't want them to get stuck on, oh no, this is something that I wrote in the outline, so this is now something that I have to follow through with on paper. Because that can cage you in and that can put a lot of unnecessary pressure on writers that they need to do something a certain way when they can feel it in their gut that that's not how it's supposed to go. So yes, if you can get rid of that mindset of you have to stick to your outline and you have to have a perfect outline in order to begin writing, it'll be a game changer. Which actually brings me to my next piece of advice, and that is start before you're ready. It's a piece of advice that I actually didn't hear from writers. It's a piece of advice I heard from business coaches who I've worked with in order to actually start my own business. And that was something that I really liked about their approach, was that, you know, you have to start things before you think that you are ready for them. And I do think that really applies to writing also. And it's the kind of principle that I've adopted in clients that I worked with, and just sort of pushing them on to write, even if they don't think the outline is perfect, or even if they don't have their characters completely figured out. I would still prefer that they started writing than to hold it back until they feel like I've got a solid, strong grasp on this, and then I can go and write the thing. So because this is the kind of advice that I learned on a life principle rather than a writing principle, I think I sort of came into writing my project with this idea of I can just start writing whenever. I don't have to wait for the perfect time to do that. And I think that also really ties in nicely with the idea of revisions, because once you get rid of this abnormal pressure of like, I have to write this novel perfect on the first try, it also becomes easier to actually start it, because you're not putting that overwhelming fear of like, oh no, this is not going to be perfect on yourself. You're actually go into it thinking, I can just write something and it doesn't have to be perfect. I know that I can fix it, in my second draft, in my third draft, in this revision, in polishing it up, whatever. But you'll be getting rid of some of those mental blocks that usually hold us back when we try to write. Okay, my fourth piece of advice, which is something that I actually got from my own writing coach, L.R. Lamb, and they coached me in university while I was attending a creative writing master's. So this advice was really eye-opening to me. It is to nail your narrative perspective. If you want to nail one thing before you go into writing your project, it's your narrative perspective. Because my first few sessions that I had with my coach, I wrote all over the place. Like I could not settle on who I wanted to be my narrator, whether I wanted to do omniscient narration or whatever, which I have opinions on. You'll know them. You can click on this video or this video. I don't know what side it's going to come up on, but you can click on this video if you want my opinion on omniscient narration. I was doing an omniscient narrator, and then I had all these ideas of like, oh, it could be a ghost, or it could be a this thing, or it could be a that thing, and I couldn't get into the book. I couldn't get into the actual novel because I didn't have it figured out of like who was going to tell the story. I didn't know what the narrative perspective was going to be. Was I going to write in first person? Was I going to write third close? I had no clue. And I think that was something that it took me a while to figure out. So I ended up actually rewriting my first 3 chapters about 4 times in total until I actually settled on something that felt kind of natural, that I was happy with, that I wanted to go along with. So don't worry so much about the plot if you are, worried, I don't know what's going to happen. I would rather worry about who is it going to happen to, and who is going to tell this story. I think actually nailing those perspectives early on in the stage of your drafting process can really help you kind of just narrow things down, first of all. And second of all, it is actually such a pain to change narrative perspective if you want to do it in a second draft. Like, it's easy to revise and write new stuff and edit your scenes and polish up your wording and change your dialogue or whatever. But when it comes to actually going and changing every single sentence from, I don't know, third person present tense to first person past tense, you're gonna feel that. Like, you are gonna feel that worse than it didn't work out. Okay, the fifth piece of advice is something that you're probably gonna hear me say a lot, and you might already be tired of hearing me say it, but it is to know your why. So know your story purpose. I think I've done this with a couple of my projects. Actually, like, when I look back on my old projects, I take a step away from them and I realize I never actually figured out the thematic argument, the reason why I was actually wanting to tell this particular story. Like, what was the point? What was the message? And coincidentally, I was actually working on a really old project this weekend. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, because I brought it up and it was one of the most well worked out projects. Like, I had a huge outline. I had, like, it was supposed to be a TV series I was writing for fun, but I decided I might want to write it as a novel or a novel series or something like that. So I went out and I looked at all of my plotting, and I had, like, every single episode beat sheeted, basically, if you know what that means. It has, like, beat sheets for every single scene and every single thing that happens. And I had done that for the first 10 episodes of this season, and then I also had, like, notes and bullet points for subsequent seasons and stuff. However, I did not have my why, so translating the story became really difficult, and it took me the entire weekend basically just to narrow down the question of why did I even set out to write this story, this project in the first place. Now, this comes down to themes and deeper purpose and meaning and all of that lovely stuff. It is definitely what I like to discuss most, story purpose and things like that, because it really means a lot to me. And I think every book should have a purpose, no matter what you're writing. And I know some people might not agree with me. Some people might be like, oh, but I can just write for entertainment, whatever. I really disagree with that. Sorry, you're not going to change my mind on that. Anyway, knowing the why drastically changes the process of writing a novel. Once you figure out at least a vague sense of direction of, this is why I want to tell this story, this is the whole point. Like, if you can say that in one sentence, and I don't mean like tell us your plot in one sentence, I mean like tell us why this story exists and what you're trying to say with that story. What is the message? What is the purpose? Why are you writing this? What are you trying to illustrate? Once you know that why, then actually plotting the entire thing and figuring out your characters and figuring out their choices and what they need to be becomes so much easier, because you know that you're doing everything in order to illustrate the why. And I can probably do a video where I might go a little bit deeper into story purpose and maybe do some analysis on some shows or something. I really like Attack on Titan. It's something my brother forced me to watch, and I got really into it. And I think that's a really good example of a series that knows its purpose and knows how to lead us to it. And everything sort of ties back to that purpose in the end. So if you want me to do a video on that, let me know below, and maybe I'll consider doing sort of a story purpose on an example of Attack on Titan. I don't know. Would you like that? Maybe tell me. Okay, and we have arrived at the last piece of advice which I have for you today, and that is the importance of backstory. Now, this is another thing that my lovely mentor, L.R. Lamb, has taught me during our time together, and that was, I was very bad at neglecting backstory. I had this thing where I thought that backstory sometimes was irrelevant, or that you didn't need it to write a good story. Now, now I am of the completely opposite opinion, and I think backstory is everything. And it took me sort of writing that novel, which I had my coach help me with, to actually figure out the importance of, like, most of the stuff that actually happens throughout my book now is stuff that happened in the backstory. Like, it's consequences of what happens in the backstory. And that really is the case for not all media and not all books. But I do think that there are plenty of examples of books that the story is the backstory. You know, like you have to figure out what happened in the backstory in order for the current story to click for us and for all the pieces to sort of fall into place. And that's usually what the sort of third act reveal is always about. It's like finding that last missing backstory piece. And then you know, oh, this is what the story was about all along. It's because of this thing that happened in the past. So I do think, yeah, having a really rich and vivid backstory and sort of taking your time with knowing that and figuring that out about every individual character, or even your world lore, or if you're writing like a fantasy novel, then lore might be really important in order to tell your actual current story. So if you do want to know more about the sort of concept of backstory and how you can actually figure out your current plot by only looking at your backstory and your characters and their histories, then you can sign up for my workshop for leveraging backstory to plot your book. I will have a link in the description to grab your tickets to this. So it should be about 2 weeks from now on a Saturday on the 24th of August. If you're like a character nerd, kind of like me, this is a really good place to start. If you're like, you don't quite know how to plot things out, but you love thinking about characters and you love figuring out, you know, where they came from and what their personalities are like and what makes them tick. And then I do think that this is the right workshop for you to attend because it really helps with kind of connecting all of that character work to form an actual story. So yeah, hopefully I will see you in there. But that's it for me today. I hope you found some of these lessons helpful, and I hope that they will hopefully influence your own writing journey in a positive way. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!